In a lot and block subdivision, really what more do you need? The fences have been up for, sometimes 20, 50 years. Maybe they're off a few inches, but you really aren't losing or gaining much land if they're inches off in a small, less than a quarter acre lot in town.
Yeah. And you can look down the row of houses and see where everyone's fences are and say, okay, it's reasonable to expect that's where your lot line is. Out in a rural setting, I think that pin is over by that third tree, across the arroyo. And then you go to put up a fence and then your neighbor Fred shows up and says, oh, no, that's not the case. So do you all advocate for a survey out in rural America when you're selling a property?
Sometimes if there's not neighbors and fence lines you can see in the ILRs, just, not going to be sufficient. I mean, we had one experience where we actually had, a manufactured home that was sitting, the corner of it was over the line on somebody else's property.
That's what I was going to say. I had one that was in the center of the house.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you're just guessing and you want to, let's put the house over in this corner. And then we've got all this acreage for animals and yard and stuff. And you don't really know where those pins are.
Yeah.
It happens more in the country.
I found a whole subdivision that's 90 feet off.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that up there next to the Knickerbocker subdivision?
It's on the far other side in Fruitland.
Wow.
On the way to the power plant.
90 feet off. That's pretty significant.
Yeah. So we tried to sell some property out there and no lawyers wanted to touch it because people have been there for 30 years and now everything's off. So you had to either resurvey the entire subdivision or just, I guess that would be the only way to do it. Or just accept that your house is in the middle of somebody else's property.
Wow. I wonder how a lender views that now that they
won't lend on it.
That's the problem. Yeah. That's where the problem lies.
So there's a difference. So staked surveys are when it's first surveyed. So then we go into like flagging the corners. That's one of the things in a rural area that I always advocate for. And then an ILR is just like you were saying, a lot and block.
Yeah. And great thank you for the distinction. Like a boundary survey is just reflagging the corners.
Yeah.
Staked survey, is going out and doing it for the first time. And you may have surveyors that disagree. Some surveyors are like, no, that pin's not right. My pin's right. And you see that. Surveyors have egos. And, much like realtors and attorneys.
It also just depends. Like whenever I bought my 10 acres out on the river, it was pretty obvious to tell where the lines were because on it was like the river, the road, and then on either side, it was like ranchers. So they already had the fence lines. They already had these things pretty established. And it was like looking at aerial map. It's like, okay, that's about right.
That's what I'm saying. Sometimes if it's obvious.
But whenever I sold it, we split it in half. And I was like, no, we need to know exactly. Because it's not obvious because it was kind of like cornered out too for a pond. And I did not want this one cottonwood tree on my side. So I was like, that needs to stay on this side. So in that case, I was like, we have to have a flagged mark survey, even though we didn't have to, in my mind. It was an expensive necessity.
Yeah. It's like a survey line that goes straight and then goes woo, 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 woo around the tree and then goes.
It was just like for the road, because it was also weird because like a neighbor owned part of the road, but then the other road was county road. I don't know how that happened, probably 50 years ago. But so we had to have it like catty corner off the side road that's owned by the county, not off the one that's owned by the neighbor. We wouldn't be able to put a road in. There was a lot of stuff that came up during the survey that was good to know.
Things to think about for sure.
Well, and two, with surveys, like if you're going to split off a portion of your property and you get a new survey, one of the things that I ran into a few times was people would record the survey, but wouldn't get a new deed for the property. So now there's two separate deeds. So when you sell it, you can actually transfer the deed. So, and the county and the title companies don't ever talk about that. And you only find out when you're trying to close on it and you go, well, we don't have a deed. So this is going to take a lot longer.
Yeah. Or people don't record their surveys. Their survey's been done. Many surveys have been done and they're not recorded. So no one knows that easement is there or that right of way or whatever else has happened. And until you really start digging, and hopefully they have a copy of it, they still hold on to that hard copy. And oftentimes it's hard to track that stuff down. What about zoning? Any thoughts or considerations on zoning?
Well, I always have people that say, I love to live in the county because I can do whatever I want to with my property. And I always tell them, but your neighbors can do whatever they want to with their property too. And that's something to consider. A lot of people want to build maybe this, majestic, gorgeous house with these perfect views. And that's a great dream. But if you are sitting in the middle of a bunch of undeveloped land and it's being sold off, who's going to buy that?
And the neighbor works on cars.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, you don't know who's going to buy that and what they're going to do with it. And they can do whatever they want with their property, just like you can. And that's something really to consider. Yeah.
Now the county's been kind of pushing in the arena of some forms of zoning to stop just willy-nilliness. Willy-nilly, hey, that's a new word.
No, okay, it's a word.
It's not new, a new just word. Grandpas use it.
Yeah. What did he use in the last one? Curmudgeons.
Curmudgeons, yeah. Cantankerous.
That's what it was.
So willy-nilliness, the county's trying to push back on some of the willy-nilliness. But you could, in essence, you could have this big, beautiful home, someone buy the property next to you and they start putting in a gravel pit, and then you've got equipment and machinery going. And
they're living in a camper with their 12 goats. And that's your view now.
Hey, but there'd be no weeds out there,
right? That's true.
Yeah. So there is some consideration there. Have you all experienced any of that happening, or have you seen the county taking some steps in that regard?
Well, not so much. I know they try to, keep the weeds down, and they have compliance officers with the city. But I think mostly the planning and zoning try to not make it checkerboard. They kind of keep residential with residential, commercial with commercial. That way, a lot of that stuff doesn't happen.
Yeah, a little more thought is put into it.
Yeah. We're not necessarily in this area, master planned city, but I think they've done a decent job of keeping, we have a whole mixed use area. They're right down down Main Street, right where we're at. And sometimes you have a business, a house. But for the most part, this town is kind of segregated that way.
Yeah, and that's done thoughtfully, though. Yeah. They want a mixed use, so you can allow for a business to operate on the lower level and an apartment on the upper level, give some versatility to the development there. But yeah, on the county, we've seen some pretty incredible things, and it can hurt your value if you don't know what those neighbors are planning on doing, or you're next to a bunch of little parcels that have been sold off. You may want to do a little bit more digging on is there any covenants? Are there any restrictions that we need to be looking at? Access to BLM is another thing to think about. That's a big amenity for a lot of people. BLM is our land to use according to the rules and guidelines that are set forth, but the BLM is a great amenity for a lot of people that ride horses, have side-by-sides, ATVs, UTVs, want to walk the trails. But you also have to be aware as well that other people get to access that amenity, and they may be crossing your road to get to that. There may be easements involved and whatnot. So interesting conversation in that regard. Anything else to consider as far as rural properties, as far as lending is concerned? There's some great loan programs out there for people to develop. Let's talk about that for a couple minutes. Aspen, you want to take that?
Yeah, you can get a USDA loan is one of the biggest perks, which is 0% down. That's very appealing
and
to a lot of people.
Over 100% of the appraised value.
It's a very appealing loan to people. I'm not a lender, so that's all I can say on it.
So USDA, it's not a USDA stake or anything like that. It's actually a USDA.
Is it similar? I have no idea. It's like when you hear Michelin tires and the Michelin Guide, complete opposite things, but same company.
Yeah. You don't want to chew on a tire.
Same company though.
But you
polar opposites.
Yeah, but you do want to go to a restaurant that has a Michelin star. The USDA is a fantastic loan. And I'm glad you brought that up, but it is a zero down product. And the push was to help development in rural areas. So they're a lot more lenient on their lending guidelines, and the ability to have a zero down loan. You can ask the seller to contribute to your closing costs. So in essence, we've seen buyers get into homes less than $1,000 just by buying outside of the city limits, which is pretty incredible.
There's even some parts here in the city that qualify for USD loans, because it's just crazy. I had one. It was right by Dustin, down in that neighborhood, and Got a USDA
Qualified
loan.
for a USDA loan.
Yep,
Wow.
crazy.
That's pretty incredible.
Happened to just be like, and they weren't going into it with that intention at all. And then the lender was like, we can do USDA on this. And that's what they did.
Yeah, wow. Why not take that opportunity?
Yeah, they got into it for under $500. It was wild.